Um, so, born in Korea, grew up in New York, Boston, and it was too cold. So, came to San Jose almost 10 years ago. Wow, it's been 10 years now. And when I got here, I was first hired at this church about 15 minutes from here called Korean Emmanuel Presbyterian Church. And I became a youth pastor there. And the first thing that I noticed as a youth pastor is that I need a girlfriend. And so, of course, I cared about my students and I wanted them to meet God, of course, right? But I was like, man, I'm here alone. I have no family, no friends, no relatives. And I'm like, I need a girlfriend. And so, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this? And so I came up with a plan. And I started a college and young adult ministry. And in that process, my family's actually right in the back. There's my wife, Nina, and my two daughters, Skylar and Zoe. And so I met Nina about 9 years ago at this college young adult ministry that I started. And I introduced myself to her. Hey, are you new here to the church? She's like, yeah, I'm new. I'm like, welcome to ministry. I'm the pastor here, and every newcomer, I take them out for coffee. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. and so I had this plan, and so I took her out, and in that process, I realized that I was like, what do you like to do? And she's like, well, this and that. And she's like, I go to morning prayer with my family at this Onri church in San Jose. And so when I found out, I had a plan that I'm gonna go to morning prayer and find her there. And so I love to sleep, but the next morning, I woke up at 3 a.m., I showered for an hour, and I ironed my shirt, and I got ready, and I came to this church in this morning prayer, and I've never been to that church before. And I was like, where's this church? I found it, I went, and there she was, and I walked in, I started to pray, and she came in. I'm like, wow, she comes to morning prayer, this is great. And you know, in Korean church, they turn off the lights, and so I'm like, I can't see her anymore. And the lights are off, and we're praying, and then all of a sudden, now the service ends, and then they say, okay, it's time for you to pray. And so we're praying, but then I'm kind of praying, but I'm confessing my sins. I'm there for God, but I'm also there for her. And so I don't want to miss. If she leaves, then I miss my timing, right? And so I have one eye closed, one eye for the Lord, and one eye for my wife, not my wife, for this new girl at this church. And we're praying. And then about 10 minutes in, I look up. She's still praying. I'm like, wow, she loves the Lord. And I pray 10 more minutes. And I look up, and she's still praying. I'm like, oh, my God, okay, it's getting a little longer. And I pray, and about 30 minutes in, she kind of gets up, and she starts to walk out. What do? This was my plan all along. I acted like I was also done at the same time. So I got up, and I walked out, and we kind of ran each other to that double doors in the back. And I bumped next to her. I'm like, oh, hi, Nina. And Nina's like, oh, hi, Pastor David. She's like, wow, you come to morning prayer? I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm like, it's good to see you. And I'm like, well, what are you doing after this? She's like, I'm going to go home. And all the plan that I had was that I would somehow plan it so that I would meet her at the end of the service, and that at that point I would say, if there's nothing else that you want to do, hey, do you want to go out for breakfast? And so I said, hey, do you want to go out for breakfast if you don't have anything? She's like, oh, yeah, I don't have much. I'm like, okay. So there it begins, our journey. I share that and then, of course, you know, we talked, we met for breakfast, and she realized how amazing I was. And right? And then, so we met, and and then we ended up dating and got married, and God gave us two beautiful girls. But I planned this whole thing out. Right? I planned it all out. What I'm not saying is that it's going to happen, everything in this world is going to happen according to your plan. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you don't plan, certainly a lot of things don't happen. Would you agree? if you don't plan, if you say, I want to go to Korea, but you don't plan for it, most likely you're not going to go to Korea. If you don't save up, if you don't buy a plane ticket, if you don't figure out where you're going to house when you go to Korea, if you don't plan those things, that's not going to happen. If you say, I'm going to get into this school, then if you don't plan for it, most likely it's not going to happen. I got to study, I got to take the test, I got to apply to the school, I want to drive. The way God designed this world is that certainly God's plans are the greatest plan for us, but that God cooperates with our plans and He uses human plans and our wisdom and our faithfulness to work out His plan in this world. Our plans matter. Our plans matter. There's nothing here that you can just get by. And in 14 years of my pastoral ministry, I hear this often. Pastor David, I want to hear the Lord more clearly. I want to get closer to the Lord. And I want to be more intimate with God. And I say, what is your plan for your spiritual journey? And most of the folks who come to church do not have a plan for that. They don't. And they assume that automatically that they would grow in the Lord. Do you see what I'm saying? Just like in our work, in our school, in our dating life, I'm not saying all those plans are guaranteed, but certainly without any plans, nothing would unfold in our lives. And our plans, God uses them. And the thing that I want to share with you this afternoon is this, that in 14 years of my ministry, so often, most of the people who say they follow God, they feel empty and dry, and they sense that they're not really close, and they wonder why. And the first thing is, do you have a plan for your spiritual journey with the Lord? And they have none. Their great plan is, I just come to church on weekends, and I pray, and I read the Bible. It's too generic. And I want to share with you today a man in the Bible who had a plan to go deeper and see what happens in their journey. So would you turn with me to Luke chapter 19. Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. Luke chapter 19, 1 through 10. I'm going to read for us. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Okay? He was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on the account of the crowds, he could not, because he was small in stature. Did you see that? Jesus is walking by, and Zacchaeus is here. He is rich. He's a chief tax collector, which means chief tax collector in those days were considered evil because they would take money from the folks and would pocket it. So when the Bible says he was a chief collector, it wasn't actually a designation of something that's positive, but it's negative. He was a scammer, right? And that's why it says, and he was rich, because he didn't give all the money back to where it belonged. He took some of the money away. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. Look at this guy. He had a plan. I heard about this Jesus. I hear that he's amazing. I hear that he's great. I want to see what he's like. So he has a small plan. But then look at this. But on the account of this crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. You know what that means? When he was small and he could not see, well, then you say, well, Pastor David, isn't it obvious? Then people just move out of the way so that he could just go see, right? Oh, there's somebody smaller. Why would you write that in the Bible? It's because he was a chief tax collector. He stole money from that. So even though he wanted to see, the other people knew who this guy was, so they didn't budge. They were all standing like this, like, hey, can I see? Like, no, you stole money from me. I'm not moving. I got the front row seat. And so he's stuck. He had a plan to see Jesus, but his plan's not working out. So verse 4. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Continuing his plan, he's like, I'm not going to give up here. I'm not going to give up my plan that I can't see. They're not moving. But the Bible says there's a sycamore tree. Do you know why he picked that tree? Why does the Bible actually say it's a sycamore tree instead of just saying he just climbed up a random tree? Everything in the Bible is intentional. And the reason why it's a sycamore tree is if you look it up on Google, it's this big tree with a lot of branches and a lot of leaves. So when you climb up, you can't really see who's up there. He climbed that tree because why? He didn't want to be seen by the crowd, right? Because of everything that he's done to them. He wanted to see Jesus, but he wanted to be covered from the crowd. So he intentionally picks a sycamore tree. He climbs up, and he ran ahead and climbed up to the sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. In verse 5, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry up and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Here is something really interesting here. Zacchaeus had a plan to somehow see Jesus, but Jesus, before that, had a plan to see Zacchaeus all along. He knew Zacchaeus' name. Even though there was a bush, he was able to identify Zacchaeus. Hey, Zacchaeus, you're up there. Hurry up and come down. And you know what Jesus says? He doesn't say, can I stay at your house? What does Jesus say? I must stay at your house. It's like, I'm coming home. And Jesus is kind of like, who does that? Who says, hey, you want to hang on? I'm like, hey, I'm going to go over your house. You know, you have your friends like that where like you don't invite them, but they kind of come over, right? It's like, wait, I didn't invite you, but why are you like, hey, we're going to hang out today. It's like, whoa, like you love me a little too much. And what Jesus is doing here is that my love is intentional and it's fierce. What Zacchaeus is doing is that I have a plan to see Jesus, but Jesus' plan for Zacchaeus is even far more intentional and fierce. Jesus had this all mapped out. And he said, I want to go to your house. I want to be with you. I'm not asking you. I'm not saying, can I come or is it okay? I'm like, I really want to stay at your house. I must stay at your house today. In verse 6, so he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. Again, right? They don't like him. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. So all of a sudden, Jesus says, I'm going to stay at your house, and then now they're in the house. Okay, imagine this. Just think about this. Jesus in Zacchaeus' house. What's happening in the house? Zacchaeus opens the door. Zacchaeus says, like, come in. Jesus says, like, okay, I told you I'm going to be in your house. He walks in, and everything in the house is all nice stuff. Because he has so much money. And so he has, I mean, this is like 2,000 years ago, but he had like, he had a PC, right? He had PS4. I mean, he was so rich. He had all these things. He had a nice sofa, and he had a waterbed, and what have you. I mean, he's got it all decked out, and he's just there. And Jesus walks into the house, and people are upset. This guy has gone with the sinner, and they're all pissed that Jesus walked into the house. And they're in the house, but there's no mention of Jesus saying anything. I could just imagine Jesus just kind of looking at all the expensive products and just kind of looking around. And can you imagine? And Jesus is not saying anything. It's like, oh, Zacchaeus, oh, this one looks really expensive. And Jesus just smiles at Zacchaeus. Wow, this one, wow, this is nice. How did you afford this one? Smile. And Zacchaeus there's no mention of the conversation, but I could just imagine Jesus just in his loving kindness, looking at all the items that Zacchaeus took and stole and from his own community and have built a nice home. And Zacchaeus and Jesus in his loving kindness is just in his home looking at him. And then all of a sudden, what happens to Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." Jesus begins to take a deeper look at his heart, and Zacchaeus responds to Jesus' invitation. I must say, for all of us here in this room, as I've been following Jesus for a long time, there are many times where Jesus invites himself into my home. And Jesus is looking around the things in my heart. When things that are going on, things that I love, and things that I treasure, and Jesus in his kindness is not yelling at you, is not screaming at you, is not condemning you. Jesus is looking and saying, this is your home. If your desire is to love me and to follow after me, what is your plan for your home? And Zacchaeus' plan for his home is that, Lord, I'm going to sell it all away. This is what I built my life around, and this is what I love. And my plan is that I'm going to give it fourfold. That is the plan that I'm going to unfold. You see, a lot of times in our journey, Jesus comes to our homes and he asks this question: what is your home like? And when you don't have any plan for that, and when you don't have any response to that, and you wonder why that you're not growing in your invitation to love God more wholly, that you're not wondering why you're not hearing his voice clearly, it's because Jesus is looking at your home and is inviting you to take a deeper look at your home. So everyone, take a moment here and just close your eyes for a moment. Just imagine Jesus saying, I must go into your house. What's in your heart? What's in your home? What are some of the things that you most think about in your heart these days? Just take a moment and just let the Spirit guide these questions. And Jesus is not, again, he just walks into Zacchaeus' home and Zacchaeus responds. And I'm not sure what is in your home, but what I do know for a fact is that Jesus longs to be in your home. And the question that Jesus is asking is, what's in your heart? What have you built your life upon? Can I say it a little differently? What are some of the destructive patterns, toxic patterns that you repeat that's in your life? Zacchaeus, his destructive pattern was that he would daily steal from the people so that he would be comfortable. What are some of the toxic patterns that's hurting you or hurting other people that you have in your life? What are some of the most deepest and the darkest things that Jesus is entering into your home and is gazing at that you have ignored his voice for? What is Jesus gazing his eyes upon in your home? So everyone, open your eyes and sadly, many Christians refuse to do the inner work with God. You cannot, and we cannot, unless we have a deep inner plan for our growth and direction. There is no way that we would understand the invitation of Christ. One of the things last year, I serve at a church called Westgate, and one of the things that, and this happens often, and Jesus has for a long time invited me to let me say it this way. For all throughout my life, there were many invitations of Jesus to the deepest and the most darkest things in my life. And sometimes I have just ignored it. Sometimes by God's grace, I had a plan and I moved forward to that. And a lot of these things that I've journeyed through, now that I can say it and I can name it and claim it, and just like Zacchaeus did, he was able to name the things in my heart. One of the things growing up, man, I was addicted to video games for a long, long time. Man, Counter-Strike, StarCraft, you name it. I was really good, by the way. And that took a long time because that was filled in my heart. Pornography was another thing that was in my heart for a long, long time. Growing up, a long, long time. Another thing that was in my heart that Jesus was calling me to, that I could not get my life around, was that I loved work more than I loved God. And about a year ago, I was on my way to church, and we were driving 70 miles per hour on, if you drive on 280 to Lawrence Expressway, that area is really bad if you're trying to get off on 280 to Lawrence Expressway. And we were on our way to church with our family, and I had two girls. They were 3 and 1 at the time. And we're driving, and the car behind, we were kind of on the freeway, and the car behind didn't know that there was traffic and was moving at full speed of 70 miles per hour. And it came so fast, and I was there, my wife and my two girls, and we had a 2003 dinky Toyota Matrix. I mean, small trunk space, like this big. And the car came straight in and hit and just ate up the trunk and went right into the back seat. And I had a brain injury. I was knocked out, and my wife, we ended up hitting the car in front. I mean, the car just slammed and smashed our car. And when I got unconscious, the first thing I looked was my girls. And I looked, and I turned around, and the car seats were not where they were supposed to be. And I was desperately, desperately scared and afraid of what's happening right now. And by God's grace, and you're like, oh, we already know what. Of course, my girls, by God's grace, they're safe. And hi, Skylar, she's making a heart sign right now. And by God's grace, I mean, God protected us, but during that time, I had a severe brain injury, and I couldn't work for about a year at church. And as I was driving my girls to the hospital each day, and we had about 22 appointments a week, chiropractic, brain, physical therapy, and so forth for all of us. And one of the days I'm going, and I'm angry in my heart. I'm getting angry. I'm driving my girls to the hospital for treatment, and I'm getting angry. Again, Jesus is inviting to the deeper work. He's constantly inviting, saying, I must remain in your house. And I'm driving to the hospital, and Jesus is saying, David, I must remain in your house. And I'm like, okay, Jesus. And I come into my house, and Jesus walks into the home, and Jesus says, David, why are you so frustrated? I saved your daughters. I saved your wife. I saved yourself. Why are you so angry? What is in your heart? And then as I was driving, I realized what was in my house, just like for Zacchaeus, it was all the things that he has built up through stealing money. For me, is that I loved work. I loved preaching. I loved teaching. I love when I do work, when people say, Pastor, you did a great job. I loved working for God. And when that was taken away from me for a year, the invitation was, David, in your home, is it your position, your title at church, or other people saying, Pastor, you're doing this, you're doing that? Is that how you have built your house? And because that's being taken away, you're deeply now sad. Do you love me in your home, or do you love serving me? And I realized the reason I was so angry driving my girls to the hospital was that I'd rather be at church working. Guys, this is really sad. And this was really sad for Zacchaeus, right? This is really sad. This is embarrassing work. This is hard work. And the reason why we don't want to do this work, guys, let me tell you, I don't know you. You don't know me. We just met. But this is not the first impression that I want to share with you. But the reason is that this is the invitation of Jesus. This is the plan for freedom. This is the plan for life. And I have seen too many Christians. I've done ministry in New York, Boston, and California, and we're all the same. Humans are the same no matter what city that we're in, no matter what. Because at the end of the day, we refuse to do the inner work of God because it's hard work, because it's embarrassing, because there's a lot of confession, there's a lot of owning that you have to do. There's some that we have to walk into our reality that we cannot. I've been growing up in youth group. I've been for many, many years. I was a pastor's kid growing up. I just went to church every week in and out. And I would go, it's comfortable to go to church, sit and do my church stuff and go home. It's comfortable to open my Bible. My dad, we would do these 40 days of special morning prayers that I had to do. And it's comfortable to come to those things and not really look what's inside. I just come up, and we were in a church in New York City. My dad's the pastor, so my dad said, David, sit in the front so that the whole church knows that the pastor's family goes to church. So I'm like, okay, Dad. I would sit there, and I would just, as the worship was going on, I would just think about Counter-Strike, and I would think about StarCraft, and I would fall asleep, and then they would say, scream after me, Jesus 3 times, Chuya, and then we would scream that 3 times, and I would knock out. And then as I knock out, there would be a hand of the Lord, and it wasn't the hand of the Lord, it was my mom's hand. She was sitting right next to me, and what she would do is she would pinch the inner thigh. And when I'm sleeping in service, when she pinches the inner thigh, I see Christ and I come back. And Jesus, no, okay. And mom would say, pay attention. And we would fall asleep. And right after the prayer time happens is the best thing. Downstairs, they would make these fresh New York bagels. And New York bagels are amazing. It's amazing. And so what I would do is I would get up and I would go downstairs, and that's all I thought about. And 40 days later, you would get a prize for coming and for 40 days straight without missing a day of church. For 40 days, you are a man of God. But all I remember is eating 40 days of bagel. But they would reward me, and I would come up in the front, and in and out, we could do this thing. We could go to church and come back. We could even open the Bible, and we could even sing songs, and we could even pray, but still refuse to do the inner work of God. Because the inner work of God is hard. And the Bible says, not only here, but throughout the scriptures, the man looks at the outer appearance, but the Lord looks at what's in your heart. It's not what comes outside, but it's what's in the inside that matters. And here's the reality of it. Until that you follow the invitation of what is the thing that's in your heart that you long for? What are some of the toxic habits that you have that you refuse to give up? And you've been a Christian for 15 years, but you're going strong. What are some of the patterns that you have in your life that as a follower of Jesus, that you say, you know what? That's not a place where I'm going to invite Jesus to. And you wonder, and I've wondered too. I'm a pastor's son. How come I can't hear God clearly? How come I don't feel intimate with Him? And I realized I did not have a plan for the inner work of God for freedom. So on this summer afternoon, in Jesus' kindness to you, as I was praying for this church, I wish I had a different message to share. But the Lord longs for all that you are. And all that you are, it's what's really hidden inside. Who you really are is what you do when nobody sees you. Let me say that again. Who you really are is not when everybody sees you. That's not who you really are. That can't be, because we can fake it. I faked it so many years of my life. And I've been hungry for the Lord and I could not figure it out. There were years in my pastoral journey where I was empty inside. Empty inside. And the Lord was inviting me for something that was inside my heart that I would not give up. I could not give up for the Lord. And sadly, it took a car accident, almost destroying my family, for me to look inside my heart and say, why does it pain me to drive my girls to the hospital? Oh my goodness. I want to go to church and keep serving God. Lord, that's not the plan that I want to have for my spiritual journey. So here is my plan going forward. So right now, with my accountability group, you know how he said for Zacchaeus, his plan was, so I end with this. So Pastor David, what does this mean? We just have two simple questions. One is, what is that thing that's hidden in your heart that Jesus is longing for freedom? And once you have that, what is your plan for it? Let me say that again and we end. What is something that's deeply hidden in your heart that nobody knows, but that it's hurting you and hurting others? And secondly, Zacchaeus said, oh, this is my plan for this. What is your plan for that? And so you know what I did for my plan? So I can't tell you to do it and not do it myself. So for a year, I try to figure out, how do I make sure that once I now go back to work, I went back to work in January, how do I make sure that I don't work 80 plus hours a week and show off to people that I can do this, I can do that, I can do this? You know what I do? I report to my accountability group every day on how many hours I worked so that I cap it at 40 hours. I come from a Korean, I don't know if you could tell, but I'm Korean. I come from a Korean background where 80 hours is normal. But the Lord said, David, why do you do 80 hours? What are you trying to prove? And so now I have to check in with my accountability. And this is what I'm confessing to you. 2 years down the road, if you see me at ice cream shop or boba shop in Fremont, right? And I'm going, right? Pastor David, you can ask me. Do you remember that plan that you said, the invitation to the inner life? I hope you remember this sermon, but if not, it's okay. Do you remember that? And do you remember that in your journey, that the one thing that the Lord in that season that you were doing was that you long to show off and you find your identity in work? Do you remember that? And are you still checking with your accountability group? I want you to ask me that. And as I am doing that, as Zacchaeus has done that, laid before you as his plan for his freedom, and as I'm doing that before you, the invitation is this. Guys, it's worth it. It's amazing. The life with God, to obey God and to hear Him and to follow Him, the adventure life is amazing. And that is the invitation that we want to have. So with that, would you close your eyes with me as we go into the time of prayer?